Well, hello children. Today's story is Hilltop Hospital by Nicholas Allen. It's one of my children's favourite books from when they were little. That's a long time ago. It was unusually quiet at Hilltop Hospital. Dr. Matthews was having a cup of tea with staff nurse Kitty. "Raining cats and dogs," he said, looking out the window, and then he looked. Uh-oh, trouble. An ambulance swerved to a halt just outside the hospital, its blue light flickering in the rain, and out jumped Ted, the driver, and Ted, his mate. They opened the doors and took out a stretcher. It sagged like a hammock. They could hardly carry it. Whatever it was under the blanket was very big and very heavy. As the two Teds staggered through the doors, a grey trunk appeared from under the blanket and waved in the air. "Oh no, it's Mrs. Indianapolis," said Dr. Matthews. "She must be ready to have her baby," said Nurse Kitty, and they both rushed out of the staff room. "This way, Teds," Nurse Kitty said, directing them towards the maternity ward. It looks a very busy maternity ward. I'm amazed they've got that giraffe in there. "Be glad to put her down," said Ted irritably. "Weighs as much as an earlier hippopotamus," mumbled the other Ted irritably. They laid Mrs. Indianapolis on the bed. Then Dr. Matthews got out his stethoscope and listened to her tummy. Bum bum, bum bum, bum bum, bum bum, bum bum. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Indianapolis?" "Just about ready, Dr. Matthews," she smiled. Dr. Matthews knew Mrs. Indianapolis well. Ever since she'd known she was going to have a baby, Mrs. Indianapolis had visited the hospital every week for checkups. Nurse Kitty went to fetch the scanner so they could see the baby on the screen. Just then, Mr. Indianapolis arrived with their son, Virtue. "Everything all right, Dr. Matthews?" said Mr. Indianapolis. "Well, hello, Virtue. I expect you're looking forward to seeing your little sister. What would you like most, a brother or a sister?" "Neither, especially not a sister," and he kicked the bed. "Oh dear." Now, Virtue," Mr. Indianapolis said, putting his trunk on his son's shoulder. Virtue liked being the only child, and he wanted to go on enjoying it. He didn't like the idea of having a brother or a sister, and having to share mum and dad. Well, it wasn't a good idea. When Nurse Kitty came back with the scanner, Dr. Matthews and she switched it on and looked at the screen. "Looks rather a big baby," said Dr. Matthews. "Yes, it does," said Nurse Kitty, who always agreed with Dr. Matthews. Partly because he was usually right, but mostly because she admired him. "Even for an elephant," he said. "We'd better call Surgeon Sally." He rang down to theatre, and Sally said she'd come up right away. When she arrived, she was dressed in a green smock, which tied at the back, and was taking off her rubber gloves. She'd just finished taking out Gertrude the hyena's tonsils. Sally had done 4 operations that morning. She enjoyed her work. Dr. Matthews sometimes wondered if she enjoyed anything else. Without saying a word, Sally studied the screen. "Caesarean," she said at once. Looks like it," said Dr. Matthews, who always agreed with Surgeon Sally. Partly because she was usually right, but mostly because he admired her. I'll prepare theatre, said Surgeon Sally. Dr. Matthews told Mrs. Indianapolis that she must get ready to go to theatre too. The two Teds lifted her onto a trolley and they wheeled the trolley down the corridor. Mr. and Mrs. Indianapolis held trunks. Not nervous, are you, Mr. Indianapolis? Said Nurse Kitty. A bit, he said. Not long now. Well, we've waited 21 months, so we've learned to be patient. That's a long time. When they reached the theatre doors, Virtue had to say goodbye to his mum. Nurse Kitty took him to the staff room for an orange juice. I bet you're really excited about a little brother or sister. Which would you like most? Said Nurse Kitty. Neither, said Virtue, especially no sister. And he almost kicked Nurse Kitty, but then thought about the orange juice. In the theatre, the nurses were sterilising the instruments. Dr. Atticus, the anaesthetist, was making preparations too. Now, let's see. 20 milligrams of bupivacaine with adrenaline, 10 units, syntoxicin, 20 milligrams of ephedrine, 4 lettuce leaves, please, nurse. 4 lettuce leaves, Dr. Atticus? Yes, he said. Missed lunch, feeling a bit hungry. Surgeon Sally put on her white mask and slipped on a new pair of gloves. She was looking forward to getting down to work. When everybody was ready, the two Teds lifted Mrs. Indianapolis very carefully onto the operating table. Right, we're off, said Ted. And I hope we won't be seeing us again today, said the other Ted. Dr. Matthews, Dr. Atticus and Surgeon Sally gathered together briefly for a final consultation. Then Dr. Matthews left, knowing his patient couldn't be in safer hands. He wandered back to the staff room, thinking he'd just have time for a cup of tea before his afternoon round. But when he got there, he found Nurse Kitty standing on one foot, as though someone had stamped on the other. Are you all right, Kitty? Oh, Dr. Matthews, said Nurse Kitty. Virtue's run away. Bother, said Dr. Matthews. I suppose we'd better go and find him. Oh, look, she does look like she's limping a bit there, doesn't she? Meanwhile, in the theatre, Surgeon Sally was working hard. All you could hear was Mrs. Indianapolis's breathing and the low voices of Sally and the team. Scalpel. Scalpel. Swab. Check gas. Checking gas. Where's that swab? Swab on its way. After a long time and much wiping of Surgeon Sally's brow, it finally happened. Something small and grey and soft, with a delicate trunk which swayed from side to side, appeared in the room. It was held up in Sally's capable paws. Sally cast a clinical eye over it. She studied its ears, its legs, its tail, and the tiny buds of trunks, of tusks. Girl, she said proudly. Definitely a girl. Then they washed her. Then they weighed her. Then they put her in a blanket to keep her warm. And then they gave her back to Mrs. Indianapolis. Oh, said Mrs. Indianapolis, isn't she lovely? Meanwhile, Dr. Matthews was still looking for Virtue. Virtue wandered down endless corridors until he came to a laboratory. He poked his head in and saw Claire and Arthur, the lab mice, who were inspecting some blood samples. "Hello," said Claire. "My mummy's having a baby." "That's nice." "No, it is not," he said, furious, and slammed the door. But now he was a little bit lost and a little bit frightened, and he became quite tearful, little tears. Dr. Matthews and Nurse Kitty, however, had given up looking for him. They couldn't find him anywhere. They were on the way back to the ward where Mrs. Indianapolis was. As they entered, they saw Mrs. Indianapolis sitting on the bed with her baby, and Mr. Indianapolis right next to her. "Isn't she lovely?" Mr. Indianapolis clapped his paws in excitement. "Just wait until Virtue sees her." "Where is Virtue?" "Ah," said Dr. Matthews, wishing Mr. Indianapolis hadn't asked that question. "Ah," said Nurse Kitty. In fact, at that very moment, Virtue was trotting tearfully past the room where Mum was. At that exact moment, his baby sister cried out from the trunk a big "Roar!" Hearing his sister and recognising the cry, although he'd never heard it before, he turned, paused, listened, and rushed in through the door. "Ah," said Dr. Matthews. "Ah," said Nurse Kitty. Virtue ran up to his mum with relief. Then he looked at the grey, wrinkly, sleepy face of his baby sister. He looked at her with curiosity. Only then did his sister stop crying and raise her tiny trunk. For a moment, Virtue did nothing, but then, very gently, he raised his trunk too. Until they touched. Everybody sighed, and even Dr. Matthews, a hardened professional, he was definitely moved. And there they're holding trunks. Several hours later, Dr. Matthews and Nurse Kitty were sitting in the staff room waiting for a cup of tea to brew. "Have you ever thought of having a family?" said Nurse Kitty. "Well, Kitty, I've always been too busy." "We're all busy, Dr. Matthews, but you need to relax sometimes." "I don't know if having a family is very relaxing," said Dr. Matthews, and he remembered Virtue. But he also thought how kind and friendly Kitty was being. Then he thought of Surgeon Sally and gazed dreamily out of the window. The rain had stopped. The sun had come out. But as he looked, he suddenly said, "Uh-oh, trouble." An ambulance swerved to a halt outside the hospital. The end. Hope you enjoyed it. See you soon.